You'll be fine on your own, right? You're strong enough. I stared at that single line glowing on my smartphone screen without even blinking. The sender was my sister, Olivia, the one person who was supposed to celebrate my engagement with me today, here at this beach house. Next to her icon was a photo of her, grinning ear to ear, probably taken on the deck of a cruise ship, while I was here in an empty, silent living room. Outside the window, the California sunset painted the calm Pacific Ocean in shades of orange. For 6 years, I'd spent countless late nights coding as a software engineer, sacrificing weekend dates, surviving on homemade sandwiches for lunch. And finally, I had earned my dream castle. Today, I wanted my whole family to see this beautiful view. I wanted to introduce my fiancé, Mason, but no one came. Not my father, not my mother, not my uncle, not my aunt, not even my sister. I knew exactly where they were, because Olivia's Instagram had kindly and cruelly told me. There they were, on a luxurious cruise ship, laughing with champagne in hand, showing not even a flicker of thought about me. And then came that one message. Not apologetic, not worried, just detached, as if it were someone else's problem. As if I had an unbreakable heart made of steel. I felt a single, tightly stretched string inside me snap with an audible break. With trembling fingers, I slowly but deliberately began typing my reply. Yes, you're right. You'll be fine on your own too. Don't expect another $1 from me. Why did a single message make me end the financial support I had provided to my family for years? It all started that day. The day my 6 years of effort finally took shape. Congratulations, ma'am. You're officially the owner. The moment I received the heavy antique-style keys from the real estate agent, I felt less like a software engineer and more like a queen who had just been handed her castle. Malibu, California. A modern glass-walled house perched atop a cliff overlooking the coastline. Warm teak wood framed its sleek, linear design, the exact house I had imagined hundreds of times in my dreams, now standing right before me. As I stepped inside, the bright oak flooring softly absorbed the sound of my new shoes. In the center of the living room stood a large fireplace with a panoramic view of the ocean, and beyond the glass wall, the vast Pacific shimmered endlessly in the sunlight. This is incredible. You really earned this all by yourself, said my fiancé Mason, standing beside me with a quiet breath of admiration. We met at the same company, and he knew better than anyone how hard I had worked. Because he was someone who had built his own life from nothing, his words carried a warmth and sincerity that touched my heart deeply. When I told him, this is a dream I want to achieve on my own, he didn't try to stop me. He simply respected my resolve and watched over me in silence, the only one who did. That night, we sat on the bare living room floor, still empty of furniture and toasted with a bottle of champagne we bought at a nearby supermarket. Even the cheap bubbles poured into plastic cups tasted like the most exquisite drink in the world. From here on, this is where our story begins, Mason said, gently taking my hand. I leaned my head softly against his shoulder. This house wasn't just a building. It was a window connecting me to the world, something I had earned through years of solitary effort. And from now on, it would be our sanctuary, the place where Mason and I would begin our new life together. The first people I wanted to invite into that sanctuary, of course, had to be my family. I wanted them to be the first to celebrate my success and my happiness. Back then, I still believed in that fragile illusion without a trace of doubt. Over the next few weeks, I juggled my work while throwing myself into preparations for the party. It wasn't just any party. To me, it was an engagement celebration, an opportunity to show my family the life I had built and the future partner with whom I would walk forward. The invitations were, of course, handmade. I used a photo of the beach house as the background and added a message. We want to celebrate the beginning of our new life with the people we love most. I ordered my father's favorite vintage whiskey and my mother's favorite white wine from her beloved winery. As for my sister Olivia, she never had a refined palate anyway. I figured she'd be happy with some colorful, photo-worthy cocktails perfect for social media. A week before the party, I called Olivia. Olivia, you're coming to the party, right? I really want you to meet Mason properly. On the other end of the line, her voice was casual, almost indifferent. Yeah, well, if my schedule works out. But hey, guess what? There's this influencer I've been following who's on a Mediterranean cruise right now. The pictures are absolutely amazing. I want to go on a trip like that someday. At that moment, I had no idea what kind of omen was hidden behind those words. I smiled faintly, thinking it was just her usual whim, and said with all my heart, "That sounds wonderful. If your blog becomes more popular, I'm sure you'll be able to take a trip like that on your own someday. You can do it. I know you can." And then the day of the party arrived. The Malibu sky was endlessly blue and clear, as if reflecting my own hopeful heart. Mason and I made the final preparations together. On the wooden deck, bottles of whiskey were lined up for my father, and on the table, I had arranged my mother's favorite white flowers. The colorful fruit cocktails I'd prepared for Olivia sparkled under the California sunlight. For this special day, I had hired a well-known local chef for catering. Among the dishes on the table was a modern interpretation of my mother's signature meatloaf, my most cherished childhood memory. When I was a child and feeling down, my mother would always make that dish for me. Today, on this joyful day, I wanted to surprise her with it. "I'm starting to get nervous," Mason said, gently taking my hand. The warmth of his touch calmed the pounding in my chest, if only a little. At 3 p.m., the official start time, we waited with excited hearts for the doorbell to ring. But it didn't. 3:15 p.m. "They're a bit late. Maybe they got caught in traffic. Malibu roads can get busy," Mason said kindly. But in my chest, a tiny thorn of unease had begun to grow. 4 p.m. The food laid out on the wooden deck sat untouched, growing colder by the minute. The chef's special meatloaf had already lost its steam. Unable to bear it any longer, I picked up my smartphone. This had to be some kind of mistake. Surely they were planning a huge surprise for me. Telling myself that, I opened my social media account with trembling fingers and began scrolling through my timeline. Until my eyes froze on one photo. It was a picture posted just 15 minutes ago by my aunt. There were familiar faces. My father, my mother, my uncle, my aunt, and my sister Olivia, all smiling radiantly. But the background wasn't my house's wooden deck. It was the deck of a luxurious cruise ship. In Olivia's hand was a champagne glass, and behind her stretched the endless blue sea. The caption beneath the photo pierced through my heart without mercy. "Last-minute cruise trip planned by Olivia. Family-only getaway, perfect day." My mind went completely blank. What is happening? What about my party? Today is supposed to be my... With shaking fingers, I tapped on Olivia's account. There, my feed was flooded with photos of my family, laughing, shining, as if I didn't exist. This can't be real. A faint sound escaped my lips. My hands holding the smartphone trembled uncontrollably. Mason noticed something was wrong and rushed over to me. "Chloe, what's going on? You're pale as a ghost." I couldn't even muster the strength to show him the screen. All I could do was stare, helplessly, at Olivia's stories updating one after another, like watching a nightmare unfold before my eyes. A lavish buffet lunch, my parents sunbathing by the pool on the ship's deck. My father, smiling from ear to ear, the kind of smile he would never show me, pouring champagne for Olivia. My mother, who always complained about being tired around me, was laughing and acting like an excited young girl. My father posing for a photo with the ship's captain. Everything was happening in real time, with smiles I had never seen before, in a world I was never invited to. There was never any seat prepared for me in the first place. As I kept scrolling, one post made me freeze completely. A distant relative had written in excitement, "Olivia is unbelievable. She just said yesterday that she wanted to go on a cruise, and she actually made it happen. And get this, she even convinced her dad to pay for the whole family's trip right on the spot. She's such a golden girl. Too bad she missed Chloe's party, but this is way more fun. Dad paid for everything? She decided just yesterday." The cost of that trip, it had to be almost the same as the down payment I'd worked 6 long years to save for this house. And my father had spent it in an instant for my sister's one-day whim. The wooden deck, once prepared for my family, sat silent and untouched. The meatloaf I'd hoped would make my mother smile had gone cold and lifeless. Beyond it stretched the breathtakingly beautiful Malibu sunset, so cruelly ironic in its perfection. And in my hand, on the smartphone screen, the noise of my family laughing together over a distant sea. It felt as if the world had been split in two. The world I had fought to build, and the world I had desperately tried to believe in. Between those two worlds, there ran a deep, cold fracture, one that could never be mended. I had no idea how much time had passed. Mason had his arm gently wrapped around my shoulders. In his embrace, I finally remembered how to breathe again. Then it happened. A dull, cheerful notification sound broke the silence, and a new message popped up on my smartphone screen. The sender was Olivia, and what was written there was more than enough to shatter my heart completely. "You'll be fine on your own, right? You're strong enough." It wasn't even phrased as a question. There was no sign of remorse, no trace of guilt. It was simply written there, as if it were an undeniable fact, like the truth of the universe itself, that I was incapable of being hurt. The single thread that had been stretched taut inside my heart for years finally burned through and snapped completely. Mason steadied the phone, slipping from my trembling hands, and read the message displayed on the screen. I saw the expression on his face harden with each passing second. "This is awful. It's just unforgivable." His voice carried both compassion for me and a quiet fury toward my family. And somehow, that anger brought me a strange, chilling clarity. Yes, what I should feel now isn't sadness. It's anger. I took the phone back from Mason's hand and began typing, slowly but with unwavering resolve. "Yes, you're right." I paused for a breath after typing that single line. Outside the window, the sun had completely sunk below the horizon, and the world was being swallowed by a blue darkness. "You'll be fine on your own, too." Of course, that wasn't true. Without the money I had been pouring out like running water all these years, her glittering life wouldn't last even a single day. "Don't expect another dollar from me." I pressed send. In that moment, what spread through my heart wasn't regret or fear, but a quiet sense of release, like the calm that follows a storm. It felt as though more than the house I had spent 6 years building, I had finally laid the true foundation of my own life. As expected, within less than a minute, my smartphone began to ring uncontrollably. The names of my father, my mother, and Olivia flashed one after another across the screen. "Wait, what do you mean?" "You're joking, right?" Without reading a single one of them, I simply pressed and held the power button. The screen went dark, and the world once again fell silent. "Are you sure about this?" Mason asked, as if confirming my resolve. I looked straight into his eyes and for the first time that day, smiled from the depths of my heart. "Yes, it's okay now." Days passed since I cut off contact with my family. The silence was supposed to bring me peace. But what filled my heart wasn't guilt. It was anger, raw, burning anger unlike anything I had ever felt before. Why did this have to happen to me? Why did they get to walk away unpunished? A dark emotion, close to vengeance, consumed me every waking hour. Seeing my torment, Mason quietly handed me a business card. "Chloe, your anger is justified. But I'm worried that if you keep burning like this, you'll destroy yourself. Maybe it's time to talk to someone to help you process what you're feeling." That was how I ended up starting therapy. Not to seek forgiveness, but to turn this anger into fuel for my future. The therapist's office was filled with warm sunlight, a calm and soothing space. The woman who introduced herself as Dr. Vanessa listened quietly, without interrupting even once, as I poured everything out. How deeply I had loved my family, how much I had wished for my sister's success, and how I felt completely betrayed. When I finally finished, what escaped from me wasn't tears, but a dry, exhausted sigh. "That must have been very painful," she said softly. "You've believed that if you endured enough, if you worked hard enough, your family would eventually come together again, haven't you?" At those words, my emotions burst forth like a dam breaking. Yes, but I can't stand myself for feeling angry. They're my family, and yet... Dr. Vanessa nodded quietly, then spoke in a calm, steady voice that reached straight into the core of my heart. "You were trying to be the sun for your family," Dr. Vanessa said softly. "By continuing to shine, you were desperately trying to keep the orbits of your family's planets from falling apart. But did you realize? Those planets were only using your light to make their own shadows darker, and they simply lazed within those shadows." The metaphor struck with painful precision. It described my life more accurately than any words ever had. "In psychology," she continued, "we call someone like your sister Olivia the golden child. And someone like you, who has been forced into the role of carrying the family's dysfunction, is called the scapegoat, the sacrificial one. This was never your fault. It's the result of a distorted family system. The sacrificial one." When I heard those words, something inside me, Something that had been tangled for decades suddenly fell into place. And, she went on, you weren't strong because you chose to be. You were strong because you had no other choice. Without that armor of strength, you would have been destroyed long ago in that family. It's okay to take off that heavy armor now. At that moment, I felt the raging fire of anger inside me gently transform into a calm, steady light. And at the same time, I understood exactly what I needed to do next. I would turn this calm into the power to protect my own sanctuary. That very day, I found a lawyer who specialized in cases like mine and signed a contract with him. His name was Ethan. I gathered every record of the financial support I had given my family, bank transfers, email exchanges, and compiled them neatly into a single file to send to him. A few days later, on a quiet weekend afternoon, Mason and I were sitting together on the wooden deck, reading. Then a car suddenly came roaring up our driveway. It was my father's familiar sedan. They must have just returned from their cruise. Out of the car stumbled my father and mother, faces twisted with rage, and my sister Olivia, her eyes swollen from crying. Mason moved slightly in front of me and muttered quietly, "They're here." I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said only, "It's okay," before walking toward the front door. They didn't even bother ringing the bell. Instead, they shook the doorknob violently. When I opened the door, my father shouted, nearly shoving me back. "Chloe, what do you think you're doing? You're ignoring our calls, not answering messages. And what's this about cutting off Olivia's allowance?" "I believe I wrote it clearly in the message," I replied calmly, "not another dollar." "Don't you dare," Olivia shrieked, her voice high and sharp like glass. "You said you'd help pay for my college because my scholarship wasn't enough. You promised to support my business too." "Yes," I said calmly, meeting her eyes. "I did say that. But that's why I paid your remaining tuition, covered the debts from your failed business, and took care of your apartment rent. All of it, for years. In total, tens of thousands of dollars. But as of this morning, every single payment has been stopped. Permanently." At those words, I saw the color drain from my mother's face. "Wait, Chloe, please. Olivia's rent is due tomorrow. If you stop paying, she'll be out on the street." Behind her, Olivia glared at me with hatred burning in her eyes and spat out, "You're so selfish. Just because I skipped one stupid party, you're trying to ruin my life?" Skipped one party? I was beyond anger now. I couldn't even tell if the creature standing in front of me was human anymore. "The moment you got this house, you became arrogant. Have you forgotten what family means?" my father shouted. "Gratitude," I said quietly. "If anything, I'm the one who deserves to be thanked, not the other way around." "What did you just say?" They tried to force their way into the house, stepping past the doorway. "That's far enough," Mason said, his voice calm but firm as he stood between us. Without a word, I reached into my pocket, took out my smartphone, and started recording. "Any further contact will be considered trespassing. Please leave immediately." In the end, the three of them stormed off, leaving behind a line straight out of a bad soap opera. "You'll regret this." As soon as the door closed, Mason wrapped his arms around me, holding me tightly. "Are you okay, Chloe?" "Yes, I'm fine," I replied, catching my breath and managing a faint smile. They just handed Ethan the perfect evidence he needs to send them a formal warning. And I was right. The very next day, Monday afternoon, the phone on my office desk rang and the receptionist's panicked voice came through the line. "Chloe, it's urgent. Your family is here in the lobby." I knew immediately what was happening. When I rushed down to the lobby, there they were, the same three people from yesterday, standing tall like intruders guarding their territory. My father was shouting at the young receptionist. "I didn't come here to beg my daughter for money. I came to tell the company president just how much she owes this family." His words were a jumble of pride and madness. My mother and Olivia were sitting on the lobby sofa, stopping passing employees one after another, trying to win their sympathy through tears. My mother grabbed one woman's arm and pleaded through sobs. "Please listen to me. Our daughter abandoned her family and is living with a terrible man." Beside her, Olivia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief in a dramatic display and added, "My sister suddenly cut off all financial support. I don't even know what to do anymore." The poor employee they had cornered stood frozen in confusion, completely unsure how to respond. Around them, my coworkers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves, unsure what was happening. Their goal was clear: to destroy my reputation at work, to isolate me and drag me back under their control by making me appear heartless and unstable. How foolish, how pathetically short-sighted, and how perfectly they had fallen into the trap I had set for them. What's going on here? As I entered the lobby, all 3 pairs of eyes turned sharply toward me. My father stepped forward eagerly, as if he had been waiting for his moment. "Chloe, let's have your colleagues hear the truth, shall we? They should know how cruelly you've treated your own family." I could feel the tension in the air as my coworkers around us held their breath. Then my supervisor, Ryan, appeared, composed and professional. "Chloe, are you all right?" he asked first, his tone calm and protective. "I'm sorry for the disturbance, Ryan," I said, steadying my voice. "These are my family members. There's been some financial conflict between us." I turned to the small crowd that had gathered and gave a brief but firm explanation of the situation. Ryan immediately understood. He looked at my father and spoke quietly but decisively. "This is a workplace. Personal matters like this should be discussed in an appropriate setting. I'll have a conference room prepared." When the 3 of them were escorted into the conference room, Ryan didn't go in with them. Instead, sitting calmly at the table, waiting for them, was my attorney, Ethan. "Good afternoon," he said evenly. "I'm Ethan, legal representative for Chloe." The moment my parents saw him, the blood drained from their faces. Ethan didn't say much. He simply opened his briefcase and, one by one, placed 3 pieces of evidence neatly on the table. The first piece of evidence: a detailed list of bank transfers, tens of thousands of dollars sent over the past several years. The second, footage from my home security cameras showing the 3 of them shouting and pounding on my front door the previous day. And the third, recordings from this company's lobby cameras capturing every moment of their disturbance just minutes ago. "Now then," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "Chloe has no intention of pressing charges. However, there are conditions." He slid a document across the table. "From this point forward, you are to refrain from any form of contact with Chloe or any of her associates, including her fiancé and her workplace, for any reason whatsoever. If this agreement is violated, we will immediately proceed with legal action for repayment of all financial support previously provided, and we will file for a restraining order." His words resonated within me like a final incantation, one that broke the curse my family had held over me for years. A legal ultimatum was the only language they were capable of understanding. My father sank helplessly into his chair. My mother began to cry quietly. Only Olivia looked up in disbelief, glancing between Ethan and me. "Wait, a lawsuit? A restraining order?" I just wanted to talk. "We're family," she whispered, her voice small and trembling. For the first time, I felt something close to pity. Even now, she truly didn't understand what she had done. "There's nothing left to say, Olivia." When I said that, my mother collapsed into tears. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm so sorry. What should we have done? What could we have done differently?" It was the first time her words had ever sounded like a real apology. I took the pen Ethan had prepared and placed it in front of my father. With shaking hands, he scrawled his name onto the document. My mother followed suit. And finally, Olivia scribbled her name weakly, her eyes hollow. "This is the last mercy I will ever grant this family," I said quietly. "In addition to this agreement, the 3 of you will be required to attend family counseling sessions. That is the only path left for you to change." I stood silently, watching as they left the conference room. Then Ryan, who had been waiting nearby, concerned, gently patted my shoulder. "Your composure in the lobby was remarkable, Chloe. You handled yourself with such dignity and calm. You're truly an asset to this company." He would never know just how much those few words uplifted me. That night, my home by the sea was filled with a warmth and laughter I hadn't felt in years. Ryan, along with my coworkers who had learned what had happened, showed up unexpectedly, arms full of pizzas and beer. "The real engagement party starts now," they said, laughing as they burst through the door. "Chloe, this house is incredible. Malibu Cliffs, now that's a sign of success." "It's beautiful. Just looking at this view makes me feel at peace." We laughed until our stomachs hurt, joking about work, about the chaos of the day and everything in between. No one called me strong. They simply treated me as a teammate, as someone who had fought hard and deserved to rest. Their warmth melted something deep inside me. Mason slipped an arm gently around my shoulder. "Look, Chloe," he whispered, "the family you truly belong to is right here." At those words, the tears I had been holding back finally fell. "Thank you. Thank you so much," I said, my voice trembling with joy. Oh, what a luxury this moment was. What I truly wanted wasn't this house. It was this. This time shared with people who accepted me, who cared for me, who celebrated my happiness. As for my family, I later heard from my aunt that after that humiliating day, the illusion of their perfect life completely collapsed. Olivia, having lost my financial support, immediately turned to our parents in tears. My father and mother, desperate to preserve Olivia's lifestyle, began dipping into their savings to cover the apartment rent and credit card bills I had once paid for her. To them, lowering the standard of living for their golden child was simply unthinkable. But their strained generosity didn't last long. Within a few months, their savings were completely gone. My father swallowed his pride and took a night shift job, while my mother returned to part-time work for the first time in years. As for Olivia, unable to pay her rent, she was evicted from her apartment. After drifting between friends' homes for several weeks, she finally gave in to reality. She deleted her once glittering Instagram account and took a job as an hourly waitress at a small seaside cafe. Confronted with the truth that their distorted love had ultimately destroyed them, my family finally decided to face the dysfunction they had denied for so long. At my father's suggestion, the three of them began attending family counseling together. It was the beginning of a long, long path toward redemption. And then, 1 year later, the night before my wedding to Mason, a small package arrived at my beach house. The return address was my parents' home, one I hadn't seen written in a long time. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside was a handmade ring pillow, clumsy but warm, crafted with unmistakable care. It was embroidered with wave patterns, stitched in soft blue thread, perhaps to capture the image of the ocean breeze. The embroidery was uneven, full of small mistakes and do-overs, each one a mark of effort and sincerity. It was clear that my proud sister Olivia had made it herself, fumbling through every stitch. The fabric came from the curtains my mother had once loved. The wooden base had the rough but careful touch of my father's handiwork, and tucked beside it was a small card. On it, written in my father's bold handwriting, my mother's soft rounded letters, and Olivia's slightly more mature script, was just the word, "Congratulations." There were no perfect words of apology, but that was fine, because that word alone told me everything I needed to know. That over the past year, they had faced their own darkness, and that now, at last, they are wishing for my happiness from their heart. Tears of quiet relief filled my eyes. At last, the long curse had lifted. And I knew. I was finally free to step into my new future.